First and foremost, I'd love to compliment you on your excellent taste in ways to spend your Saturday night. My name is Gray Drake. I work with KCAL CBS here in Los Angeles. And please put your hands together one more time for our guest this evening, director and co-writer Catherine Ferguson and Stephen Bogart. They've spread us out quite evenly here on this stage, Stephen. And the fun fact is we have one mic for this evening. So you know what actually might be good is to move you just a little closer. Yeah, come on in the middle here.
Nice and cozy. Perfect.
All right. So, everybody in the audience, again, thank you for coming out tonight. We want to make sure that we get to your questions. So let those cook for a minute, and I'm just going to get us started because I've got a million. So let's start here at the beginning. Okay, so Catherine, can you talk about how you got involved with the project?
Absolutely. Hi everybody. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming out tonight. Yes, so basically Universal got in touch with me a couple of years ago about this excellent project that they had going, and it was an initial conversation with myself and Universal about how to bring this story to life. I, as a filmmaker, had only really seen about 5 of Bogart's films by this point, and I suppose what I wanted to do was work out, was there a film that I could tell? And spent about 2 to 3 months working with Eleanor Emtage, who is the co-writer and producer I work with, and we spent a long time just really going back and back and back into the archive, into Bogart's story, and really trying to work out a story that we'd like to watch as women and as female filmmakers. And quite quickly, with this project and with our research, we started to find these incredible stories of the women in his life, and that's very much the origin story of this project.
And I think, certainly for an icon that we all consider to be like the height of masculinity and cool, seeing him through that lens is so unique, you know. And Stephen, for you, what was it like opening up that archive and finally giving your dad this very kind of thorough documentary that gives us that nuance that so many of us didn't have for him?
Well, first of all, the whole thing was Catherine. I mean, you know, when she came to us, it was you and I think Ellie. And you, Ellie is the producer who is home just having had a child. Poor thing. But no, when Catherine came to me, I'm going, first of all, my partner said they want to do a documentary. I'm saying, look, if it's going to be the same old thing of the movie and the movie and the movie, and you know, we've all seen that, we all know that. So it wasn't going to be that. But when Catherine came to me with her perspective and what she wanted to do, I had never thought of that. You know, to look at my father's life through the women in his life and how his career trajectory was influenced by each one was so unique to me, and I just I was floored. And then of course I watched Catherine's documentary on Sinead O'Connor. I don't know how many of you have seen that, but it's absolutely tremendous. And when I saw that, and when I talked to Catherine and Ellie, I was 100% all in. And from then, I kind of stepped back and let the professionals do their thing. Because when you have someone as talented as Catherine, I hate to keep saying this, but since she hasn't been here for a couple of days, I'm gonna pile it on. And then you just kind of step back and let them do what they have to do, and you try to stay out of the way.
Catherine, would you say that you had something of a preconceived notion that changed in your extensive study?
We we really didn't know much about the man behind the myth. I know that's very cliche, but we really didn't know anything about his back history. So it was really starting from scratch, and I suppose everything we learned was new and surprising to us. Obviously, we were very aware of his icon status, and yeah, as you say, being this like icon of 20th century masculinity was very interesting. So I suppose we were really keen to work out how he got there and who this man was, and then by looking at these very formidable women in his life and how they influenced him, which really, for us, it really started with his mother Maud, as we keep going back to in the film, incredible woman herself.
I loved the list of things that Maya wanted to, that she said you could throw at people. I was like, God, she was a smart woman, wasn't she? She was great. Stephen, was there a time in your life where you decided that it was time to talk about your father? You've written a book, you know, and now you're the head. Yeah, I actually, to be perfectly frank, I haven't read the book. And I'm going to now because of all of this, and I'm fascinated.
No, I think so. Gotta get the mic again. That's okay, Catherine. No, I really was not keen to be the son of Humphrey Bogart for a long time, because when you get in that, when you're perceived as that, there's nothing else. So you have to really try to find your own way and try to do stuff to separate yourself. People have asked me, did I ever want to be in pictures? No, that would have been stupid. Can you imagine being compared to Humphrey Bogart? It wouldn't have worked out. So it took me a long time, and once I started to forge my own career and stuff, and once you get to a certain age, you start to mature, you kind of put that other bad stuff behind you, and you kind of put it out there, and then it kind of like, okay, that's done, and now you can be comfortable with the whole thing, because you have your own life. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people. You know, my friend Cecilia Peck's going to be there tomorrow, and brilliant filmmaker. You know, I don't know if you know. Yeah, you know, she did the In Excess thing, and she has the same problem that I did. She's Gregory Peck's daughter, and so how do you get past that? And she managed to do that by forging again her own career and her own life.
It's interesting just thinking about your book, because that was one of the biogs that we did read. That when I read, I did at the very beginning, and I think it was a very nuanced take and a very honest take on your father, and I think that's what became exciting, I suppose, when we started to collaborate, because I knew that we'd be able to talk from an honest place and talk about warts and all, because you had, and you know, I feel like that was a really good place to start the collaboration together.
Well, we spoke about that. One mic. Well, we spoke about that a few days ago or last week when we talked, and you said the most important thing, because there's some rumors around my father and stuff, and you just wanted to tell the truth. And to make it factual, this is what's known, and this is what happened. And I think that was very important.
All right, now let's open it up out here. I'd like to invite your questions if you have any, because once again, I'll keep going if you don't. All right, keep thinking. I'd like to talk about the narrator and your choice in Carrie Shale.
Yes, so I suppose with the narration in general, we put together, from the very get-go, we really wanted Bogart telling his own story, and in order to do that, we had to create a script. And to create the script, we had to mine through just so many interviews and all of the biographies and every last dollop of dialogue that we could ever find from Bogart himself, and then construct it into a script for the film, so he's telling us what's happening. We did toy with the idea of points of Do we go full Bogart impersonator? Do we go AI? And we decided against all of that. And we thought, let's go with a male voice that is of the right age for our Bogart, who doesn't sound wildly different, but we're not trying to impersonate him. And that became something that became pretty important to us, so that we hope that Kerry's voice, although it's maybe slightly jarring at the start, once you get into the character and into Bogart himself and what he's telling you, it becomes less important. So yeah.
The Times said that. In the Times review, it talked about that, and it talked about Carrie not sounding like my father, but also sounding enough like him so that he wasn't an imitator, but it was the same kind of milieu that my father spoke in, or the same kind of way. And as you get into the film, he really did his job. I mean, he really came out and did a fantastic job, and you didn't think about, oh, yeah, no, it's not an imitator. You don't want an imitator. You know, you want someone who can get the point across, who's not going to be distracting. And as the Times said, it worked, because as you continue into the film, he just melds right into the whole thing. Somebody got to ask something. Help us out.
Right there.
For you, at which point did you discover the Mayo being kind of the link? The first two wives obviously were important, but at what point did that click for you in the process?
I mean, I think in the very earliest research stage, really, when we started to look into all of the wives, and I suppose with Mayo in particular, Ellie and I just felt quite passionately about not leaving her where she'd been left in history. I mean, it's hard to tell her story because it's obviously a difficult, problematic one, and she had a very hard time. I suppose we just were trying to be much more empathetic with what she'd gone through as a woman in Hollywood in the 30s, and the gender gap with, her career in the 30s being something that she adored and was very successful with. And obviously when your father and her met, they were at very similar points. And I think Eric Lax says it very beautifully about being on escalators face to face and, at the same age, at the same time, same point in their careers, and hers dropping down drastically as his continues on. And I think that was it. And it was really important to us to try and get that across. Everything that we'd read was very dismissive and derogatory about her. And I suppose what we were trying to do is put context into what was actually going on with her mental health and what she suffered.
Help us out here.
Oh, Steve, I was going to ask, but you've discussed this about the people who were speaking. I could tell when it was you, and I didn't understand quite what you said about who did Humphrey Bogart's voice. Sometimes it was him, right?
Oh, yeah, Christine, yeah. It was him, and a lot of it was him.
Yeah.
And Carrie was there when his voice wasn't, but yeah, there was a lot of him, and
Yeah.
I did a couple things, and so
Oh,
there
yeah,
were a lot
clearly.
of voices in the whole thing. But Carrie's was the link that went all the way through, and my father, and then of course there was my mother, Louise Brooks, and Joe Hyams, and Eric Lax, who took over for when Anne Sperber originally was writing the book, and she died, and so he took over and finished the book. It's a great book, and so there were a number of different voices.
What about like Mary Baker and people like that? Were those the real voices?
Yes, they
Oh,
were.
it was?
They were.
Because I've done a lot of research. Steve knows that. Okay. Well, thank you.
They were from the Joe Hyams tapes.
Pardon?
The Mary Baker, and whenever you hear Mary and various of the other contributors, they were from the Joe Hyams tapes, the
Oh.
original voices. We had to clean them up a little bit, as they were quite raggedy tapes from
It
the
was
60s.
wonderfully put together.
Thank you.
He wrote one of the first bios.
He did, yes, he did.
Well,
what was the biggest challenge you had in making it?
Good point. I think maybe trying to get the voice right was actually one of the hardest things because he's got such a distinctive voice. It was how to do that correctly. And there was a point when we thought about AI quite seriously. And then it was also just as everything was going terribly wrong in that direction, and we thought, let's definitely not do that. And I'm really glad we didn't, obviously. So yeah, I think that it was just how to, because the narration was obviously just a key thread. It was the core of our film. So making sure we had the right person to voice it.
I think that was a great decision in watching and listening. It wasn't an impersonator, to your point. It was somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that, it really worked. I thought it would have sounded cheesy if
Yes.
it was an impersonator.
Yes, and
Like
Carrie.
Rich Little or somebody.
Yes, no, well, yeah.
I think he's still alive in Vegas.
Is he?
How long did it take from the very beginning of the idea all the way till you finally had it done?
I'd say about a year. Yeah, was it? It does. I think, yeah, the actual edit process, maybe about a year, yeah. And then post-production and everything afterwards, yeah.
To Stephen, what career did you end up pursuing?
Well, I was in TV news. Yeah, I worked for a lot of places. I worked for ESPN, Court TV, NBC, CBS, lots of stuff. Satellite News Channel, which nobody has heard of.
Right here.
Oh, that's right. Edon, I forgot you would be here. Yeah, he's heard of it. Well, we worked together with my wife Carla and Edon, and yeah. So it's so I did that behind the scenes. When I was in high school, when I was in grade school, they always wanted me to be in stuff because of obviously I was a terrible actor.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Buckley in New York, which I hated, but I was Bianca in Taming of the Shrew. Boys' school. Yeah. And then I went to Milton Academy in Milton, Massachusetts, and I was General Snippet in The Mouse That Roared. That's the only two things I did. I was really bad. I didn't like it. I'm not good at being someone else. That's my problem.
Your voice has a little bit of a timbre of your dad.
That would be logical.
There's a question right there.
Is there anything that you really wish you could have put in this movie, but it didn't fit somehow? But is there something that you wish you could have told about Bogey that you just didn't get a chance to?
Not really, because we were so focused on the lens that we wanted to tell this story through. I think maybe more information about some of the earlier wives would have been helpful, but we really mined for everything that we could, and particularly Mary Phillips, I would have liked a bit more about her, but we struggled with some of the earlier wives to be able to pad them out as much as we would have wanted to, but a lot of the information isn't there, which speaks volumes about women's history being, it's not deemed as important, unfortunately. And I think so much of, I suppose, with all of the women that feature in the film, it was really, I suppose, a bit of a revisionist history and not leaving them as footnotes in history and trying to bring them back to life when they've been long forgotten. But trying to find some of the information was very difficult. So yeah, a bit more on Maud and Mary and Helen Mencken would have been great.
Did you use a lot of home movies or portions of that are at the house and on the boat and all of that? Were those personal home movies of Lauren Bacall?
Yeah. I think Richard Brooks took a lot of those home movies. And so we've always kept them, and I've seen them time and again. And a lot of them have never been used before, especially the African Queen stuff. And they found so much amazing stuff. I really couldn't believe the stuff that they found, especially on Helen and Mary. I mean, it's you know, I don't remember. Did we hear Maud? Yeah, we heard her once. Yeah.
Like 3 times.
Yeah. And to find the voices of these people and to be able to weave that into the story, it was amazing to me. You know, and you could tell each person. You know, Maud was a hard ass and she was tough, and when my father came home and you know he didn't really have a job, she goes, "Well, we're not going to support you." Unlike today. I'm kidding. But and so he joins the Navy. So I think Maud's upbringing made him tough. You know, made him, all right, I'm going to go out and do it myself. And then, you know, he's the guy, he's just cleaning the stage and everything, and he falls in love, or Helen falls in love with him, or whatever it was. And he, you know, she was a gorgeous woman. And that kind of fizzled out a little bit, and that's okay. And then he met Mary, and I think actually he really loved Mary. I think so, because you know, he brought her out to California, and he wanted her to stay, and she wanted to go back and be on Broadway, so that didn't work out. Now I think that's what led to Mayo and a totally different person, another gorgeous woman, and Mayo, I think they got it, you know, at the end of it, it was kind of touch and go, and they were like the battling Bogarts and all that sort of stuff. But I think Mayo guided him through, you know, an important part of his career, as the film says. And then my mother, of course. And that's, you know, that's the story that's been told time and again. And to tell it this way was so great, because normally it's, oh, they just Bogey and Bacall and the whole thing, and yeah, but there was a lot more to it than that in guiding his life, the rest of his life. And you know, I mean, he was not a guy who wanted kids, and she wanted him to have kids, and then they had me, and you know, he still wanted to be with her, and you have the whole African Queen thing, and the, you know, my Mrs. What's her name? I forget her name. 75. And she died on the tarmac, and you know, my mother kept going to New York, and they call her in New York, and she goes, you know, do I go home and take care of the 2-year-old kid who really can't do anything anyway, or do I send my mother, who is my grandmother, out to California, and I get to go and make a, you know, go to Paris and go to England, and I think they saw the coronation of Queen Elizabeth then, and make a movie with you know, Katharine Hepburn and John Huston, Africa, and my mother made the right choice, I think. I mean, it was a lot more fun than being home with the kids.
Just back to the archive question, the home movies. Your dad actually filmed a lot of movies himself, didn't he?
Do you remember that? And having a camera?
No, I do remember him. I have the camera. I do. I have the camera. There aren't a lot of memories from back then. I mean, it was 67 years ago since he died, so make it like 70 years ago when he was somewhat virile. I mean, when he was healthy, and he'd come home from work, and then he'd want to have dinner with my mother, and you know, because back then, as many of you know, kids were to be seen and not heard. You know, I'm going to have dinner with the adults. You guys go and get to sit at the kids' table and eat kids' food. And then on the weekends, 45 weekends a year, he'd go on the boat. So didn't really get to see him that much.
What was the age difference between Helen and him when you met her?
I have no idea.
I got the impression she was an older lady.
Oh
Yeah,
no,
she was-
Helen?
No, Helen?
Well, it was when he was working behind the scenes.
Oh, she was definitely older.
Yeah.
Right?
I thought she was just a year or two. I don't think there was much between them.
I mean, she was kind of a star.
She was, but I don't think there was much between them in age. I can't remember, but I don't think so. I think she was quite young.
Mayo was older.
Right.
I think only a year or two as well. I think so. I think so.
Yeah, well, he liked older women. And then he made up for it.
Yeah, I'd like to say one thing. It was amazing, I thought, and I was wondering, he seemed really humble. Like, I loved, there was a key line that he said something like, the studios back then could have got behind anybody. Was he really like, I look at him, I remember my parents really loved him, my mom especially. I'm wondering, like, he didn't seem like he'd be that humble, like, because he's such a strong presence and his looks and everything. But yet, that one moment, and was there more of that because how did you discover that? Like, was that just for you, Stephen, or was that something you discovered in research? Because that came across super humble to me, and it struck me,
I just don't think he took it very seriously, do you? I mean, he took his work very seriously, but I don't think he took the Hollywood system and the star system seriously at all.
I think deep down he didn't let it out, but he wanted to be successful, and he wanted, like when Brando won, which, and the mumbling and the whole thing. And frankly, I think that probably what should have happened, if they were going to do it that way, that Brando might have won for Streetcar,
Right,
and my father should have won for Caine Mutiny.
yes.
But they got it backwards. And, I think he really wanted that, but he came off as being humble, but I don't know if humble's the word. Maybe somewhat self-deprecating, but I don't know that he was humble. I think he was just loner, and he kept his feelings inside, and he wasn't going to let out that, I'm really pissed off that this
He was
happened.
competitive then, for sure, yeah. Thank you.
We have one back there. Yep.
This is mostly for Stephen, but I think Catherine would have a perspective on it as well. But was there anything that that was found or discovered
Speak
that
up.
gave you, sorry, was there anything that gave you a different perspective on your father through this process of making this film?
Not really. I mean, I should say, the whole project gave me a different perspective because I never thought of it that way. So thinking about his, as I said, arc through the eyes of his women, yeah, it gave me, I don't know if different perspective is the right way to put it. I think it's kind of this is part of what made him him, because you don't really think about that. You think about, well, he got the break here, and he put in his time, and he did some theater, and then he did all these gangster things, and you really don't think about the emotional part and the inside part of what makes a person. And I think that all of us probably have that kind of arc, positive or negative, within us, whether it be a man or a woman, but usually it's a woman probably, right? I mean, women usually are leading the way, and the guys are just the guys.
I think also just on the perspective of him, I think looking at his tenacity was really interesting as well. The fact that it did take him 20 years of hard graft before he got anywhere, really, I think shows a real strength of character, because that must have been pretty tough just to keep going and going and going, with...
And the times he grew up, you look at, he was born in the first 10 years really don't matter. But then in his 20s, he was, in his teens, there was World War I. And his 20s was the Roaring 20s, and a whole different kind of atmosphere. And the 30s was the Depression, and the 40s was World War II. So there was a lot of stuff going on in each thing, and to navigate that and keep pushing forward. He came back to New York, and he had to make his living with chess. He swore, if I ever get out there again, I'm not coming back. And so he did have the tenacity. You're absolutely right. And he used that to his advantage to get through all these strange things that were happening every decade. I mean, just monumental changes in this country. Richard.
Yeah, I had a question. So, did he consistently keep diaries his entire life, or was it a certain period, or did you craft some of that narration based on information that you gathered?
There weren't any diaries at all.
Oh,
It was really from interviews. It was any any of the biographies that he'd done already, and we mined every last line out of them that he'd said. I think every single word in his narration is Bogart's real words, but that is across many sources, but all real ones, which is a relief to report. But no diary, sadly. We would have loved a diary.
All right, do we have anybody in the back?
No, they don't want to say anything.
Fair enough, people in the back. As we begin to wrap up, I wanted to ask you both, what do you think it is about him? I know it's a broad question, and I think the movie certainly does a lot to answer it, but to you personally, they don't make icons like this anymore. And they're truly, so.
They do, but these days their names are a little different. Kardashian. If I knew, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I'd be bottling it and selling it. So I had no idea. I mean, you can say, well, he died too soon, and he was a great actor, and he made great movies, and he picked great projects to do because he was a writer's person, and all that's great. But there are other people who made great movies, and then my mother, I think, kind of, the couple, Bogey and Bacall, kind of vaulted them into a certain area, and then the Harvard and the Brattle Theater, and they started to come out with all that, but that was 60 years ago. So I have no idea. It's just a confluence of events that just boom, 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 and here we are, 67 years after he died, still talking about him. It's so strange.
I'd actually love to know. I'd love to ask the audience that question if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
I think that's why she's a really smart girl. That's exactly the question.
I guess the feeling I got from it is that he was true to himself. He lived his life as as an actor, as a performer, as who he was. And yes, the women, flowed in and out and carried him through that, but it just felt like he was his authentic self.
Anybody else? Christine?
Oh, sorry, I keep talking. I wanted to ask, I hope this isn't too personal, but because he sadly died when you were very young and your mother lived a long life, did you find the things that she talked about with your dad to be helpful in this film?
Was she helpful? My mother?
Yes.
You could say that. You've never met my mother.
No, I didn't.
She would, she'd say, you have to be more like your father. You have to, golden rule, don't lie. Your father never told a lie. Well, come on. I mean, if you asked her, he was perfect. So that was another issue that I had because you want to find warts and all. And there were a few warts.
Yeah, of
he
course.
was, nobody's
As
perfect
we
here.
all have.
So it's, so she had her perspective, and it took someone like Catherine to get through all that, to come out with the truth and who he really was, as I said, warts and all. And like John Huston and the House Un-American activities thing.
Yes, that was
I
really
still can't
interesting.
figure out what was so bad, but that's besides the point. But the eulogy is probably the best eulogy I've ever heard.
Absolutely.
I mean, and he wrote it, and you can actually look at the whole thing. You can hear the whole thing online, and it's really spectacular. He didn't want to do it because he was my father's best friend. He was very broken up and all that, but he came through and he did it, and you heard it. You heard part of it.
So here's the great news. You can watch this again on December 9th on all digital platforms. So just when you're with your families, you're all looking for something to do, you can celebrate this incredible icon, this amazing work by Catherine Ferguson. Please thank our guests tonight. Join me in thanking Catherine and Stephen Bogart. Spread the word. Everyone have a wonderful Saturday. And once again, don't forget, you have amazing taste. Thank you.